Everybody, I'm here with Brandon, who is with us with our very first cohort with the University of Essex. And he is going to tell us a little bit about himself. He's going to tell us what he's been studying and how it's changed his practice. So, Brandon, tell me just how you came, you hear a little bit about your history and how you came here.
Of course. I trained professionally in musical theatre and went into that purely out of the love for performing, with no real, idea of teaching necessarily. And then I worked professionally in musicals, touring the UK and internationally. And in that time, I sort of came across, I started teaching a little bit just to support myself more than anything else, and had had questions vocally for myself, which is then what led me to sort of explore the idea of studying that more. And then eventually how I worked with someone who had done LMA with you, and that made me go, okay, perhaps that's the right path. And so that's how I ended up coming here to start my study.
So, you obviously have just completed your very first module. I know you're really early on in your journey, but I'd love to know what it was. So, for context, for those that are listening, you've studied a range of theories and then you've had to apply it to your practice. That's kind of been the assignment brief. So, just tell us what you looked at.
So I was thinking about what to do when it came to it, and I was a bit scrambled. And then I've sort of looked inward and thought, okay, what did I really struggle with? And something that I really did when I was at school, it was very unclear about transitioning from a legit vocal quality to a belt. And I pretty much approached it by trying to cram one style into the same space and do it the same way, and struggled a lot. And up until quite recently, to be honest, still struggled with that. And I didn't really have a teacher explain to me the differences in a particularly clear way where I went, that's what's going on. And I've had the same experience when I've worked in jobs with people who they're either generally be like, oh, I sing legit or I belt. And then when they go between the two, they go, oh, I've kind of struggled. And so that made me go, okay, there must be something in that. Let's have a look at it. And then once I started looking at acoustics, and I sort of went, oh, wow, okay. So took myself through that. And a lot of my learning was done through imagery. Which obviously happens a lot in singing, and it's sort of that a lot of similes to help people connect in a sensory way to what they're doing. And so I thought, okay, how can acoustics and imagery come together and be used to potentially educate the singer so they become autonomous and know, okay, here are the differences between those styles acoustically, and really go in with an awareness of what the difference is between the two. Even though there is a bit more muddied, that's something I found when I was looking at it, with male voice, in terms of the agreement between, do they belt, or, is there, what really is the difference, which is something I'm still looking at diving into. But yes, that's what I ended up looking at, was those fundamental differences acoustically, and how that can potentially be explored with the student, so that they have that autonomous capability to go, okay, great, I'm doing this style, this is what needs to be happening, and then they can work between the two, if that makes sense.
Yes. And so, what were your main findings and how did it change your practice?
So one of my biggest findings was at the little agreement there was around legit as a style in as a whole, which I was actually shocked by. So that was the first kind of challenge, to be honest. But then sort of finding the correlation between, I sort of took legit in its more classical form in the end, so that I could have a bit more research to pull from. And then sort of went, okay, great. Found the acoustic elements of belt and those differences, and especially the work of Ken Bozeman influenced a lot of that in terms of the way he breaks it down so well. And found that whilst there are clear differences in those two, and then also looked at I found that through working with sensation, then you can really define those two. And while you don't necessarily, I didn't want to I fear that sometimes it can become boxy and it's like it's this or it's this. But I found that actually there's the two can work in tandem by sensing those differences, which has then definitely changed the way I work in terms of bringing awareness to performance and the way the vowels can cooperate or not cooperate with certain sounds, or ways to then work with them to make the sound qualities easier and change the sound qualities in themselves. Um, it's kind of completely revolutionized the way I would work. I was completely unaware of those things beforehand, and so it's
Wow.
really changed my view of understanding why people might come up against struggles, or being able to look at each singer individually and sort of, rather than seeing it as a reflection of my teaching, of going, actually it's not about me, it's just about the singer, and going with them and going, okay, great, this is what works for you, this is how you can use this these tools for you, rather than sometimes I think a teacher can hold on to that, not hold on to the knowledge even purposely, but not necessarily go, okay, here's what's going on, so that when a singer leaves that studio, they're able to autonomously switch between styles and know what they're doing and why they're making certain decisions in order to do that.
You're actually an accomplished performer and you were a swing, weren't you? Which is obviously incredibly demanding. Has that changed your own performance and your own voice?
Oh, 100%. It's I don't overthink it nearly as much as I did. And it just makes you go, okay, great. You look at each. I'm able to separate the vocal requirement from me, if that makes sense, in terms of going, okay, that's what's required and that's what I need to do it, rather than going, God, this is my voice and I actually don't know how to make it do those very different. Like I can do it, but I don't know how I'm doing that. So the feeling of being unsure, stepping into different things. It's become more of a craft rather than a guesswork of going, okay, I know I can make these sounds, don't necessarily know how, so that it's consistent, especially when you're doing 8 shows a week and you don't know what role you're going to be in those shows. It makes you able to go, okay, right, each part, each vocal track, those are what you need to do, and it relieves a lot of stress from the not knowing, especially when being a swing, especially there's a lot of not knowing as it is. With
Yeah.
the what can go on from night to night. So yeah, it just solidifies your own, you know, solidifies another part of that craft where you go, great, it's solid. You can dip in and out.
Yeah, that's a really great outcome, isn't it? And so, in terms of, I'm really intrigued to know where you're going to go next. So, you're now designing a tool. Are you staying with what you've done? Are you staying in that, or are you changing?
So I've been dancing in between the two, to be honest. I'm unsure, but I think there's something in it which I don't think I've fully mined it for myself, where I can go, okay, I think there is something here, whether it be a a resource that's a visual thing in order to understand the how vowels play with as you're going and you're working with different styles in between that, or whether it's kind of like a program that a student can use when they're not with a teacher, so they have that, so it's not guesswork when they're outside of a studio and they don't have that immediate feedback, in order to go, okay, great, this is my legit warm up. This is my contemporary musical theatre, and they sort of are able to dip inside of those within one instrument with a bit more confidence rather than guessing. Or so it's either a kind of student focused thing, or whether it be a teacher resource where they go, okay, great, this is what I need to understand in order to better impart that knowledge to a student. So that's where I'm at the moment, of deciding whether it should be a teacher focused thing or a student focused thing.